So I just want to say welcome and Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Brian Straniti, and I'm the Outreach and Engagement Manager with the Duchess Land Conservancy. Thank you for joining us tonight for our third webinar in this year's Earth Matters series. We truly enjoy hosting these events, and we're so happy you can all be here with us tonight. So tonight we're excited to welcome Matt Powers as he gives his presentation on regenerative soil. But first, let's go over some basic logistics about tonight's webinar, followed by a brief introduction to the Duchess Land Conservancy and tonight's presenter. So logistically, first, you're muted to ensure that there's no interruption during the presentation. Second, the raise hand function is disabled. If you can enter all your questions into the Q&A box at any point during the presentation. This box can be found at the bottom center of your screen. Questions will be addressed when the presentation is done or by our team during the presentation if possible. If there are a great deal of questions and not a lot of time at the end of the presentation, we'll try to combine them based on topics. Third, the chat is disabled for this event. Fourth, closed captioning is enabled for this event. To turn on this function, please select the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. And finally, I'd like to hand it over to Julie Hart, our Education Director, who will tell you a bit about the Duchess Land Conservancy, this webinar series, and our guest presenter tonight. Julie.
Thank you, Brian, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. I'm Julie Hart, an ecologist and educator here at the Duchess Land Conservancy. So I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the DLC already, but for anyone who's not, just let me give you a quick overview. The Duchess Land Conservancy is a private nonprofit land conservation organization located in the Hudson Valley of New York State. And we are dedicated to preserving the farms, forests, wetlands and waterways, open spaces and wildlife habitats of Dutchess County. We are an accredited land trust, and since our founding in 1985, we have worked with hundreds of landowners and protected almost 46,000 acres of land. Many thanks to the Molly B. Schaefer Education Fund for sponsoring this event. We are so excited for this season of Earth Matters, the DLC's Winter's webinar series. We'll be bringing you speakers on the first Tuesday of each month through April. And this season, we are digging into the topic of soil health. We'll be learning about soil food webs, regenerative soil management practices, composting, and the ecology of soil health. Our theme is very simple. Soil is not dirt. So let's get started. Tonight, we're really thrilled to welcome Matt Powers, who's also known as the permaculture student. Matt is an author, educator, entrepreneur, and gardener focused on creating the academic bridge to the regenerative economy. He's the author of Regenerative Soil, The Science and Solutions, which I have to say is the book that I wish I could have had back when I was starting to learn about soil science. And he's created curricula on permaculture for school-age kids and is the author of The Permaculture Student One, a book designed for young adults. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, who will explain to us why regenerative soil is the key to healthy, resilient, and nutritionally dense plants. Take it away, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so wonderful. I'm really excited and I love what you all are doing. Preserving land and protecting land is so incredibly important because so many of these places that are older farms and grasslands, they've got soil microbes that have been protected this whole time. So it all makes sense as we go through. So let's talk about it. What is regenerative soil? First of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you for caring about the earth. Thank you for being willing to listen. So where does this all begin? That's really the question, because if we can figure out where it begins, we can really understand the full story. Well, it begins with the sun. It begins with the energy from the sun and begins with the energy hitting those plants. And that's that photosynthetic process of the energy of the sun hitting the earth. And that photosynthesis is different on land and in water. Notice how oxygen is vented on land and oxygen is released into the water in the oceans. It's very different. And yes, we get the majority of our oxygen from ocean photosynthesis coming out of the ocean. That's true. But we still need that oxygen on land. We still need those plants as part of that equation. We can't suddenly lose all of that. The hydrogen cycle. Photosynthesis is part of the hydrogen cycle as well, because you need water to photosynthesize. So the thing that I want to take away from this, though, is that when we add water to the CO2 and light, we do create oxygen, but we create a sugar. Do you guys see that right there in the center? That equation? I mean, we've probably heard about this, but it's the type of sugar that we end up making within the plant that matters. So if you have a simple sugar, a monosaccharide versus a polysaccharide, you have a very different plant. And things may start off as a monosaccharide or a simple sugar, but if the plant's properly processing things, it ends up as a polysaccharide. So non-reducing versus reducing. Remember our chemistry? When we are reducing, we're adding energy. So these are sugars that are adding energy or taking away energy. When you have monosaccharides, you have pathogen bait. They attract the microbes. But when you have polysaccharides, the plants literally are healthy, and so they become power plants for the entire ecosystem all over the earth. And it feeds soil life and it builds soil. So this is the reality of what's going on with photosynthesis. It, when it's healthy, is feeding the soil food web, and it's releasing energy all at the same time, and it's releasing those more complex sugars, those longer chains of carbon. And when it's simple sugars, it's calling in the pathogens and the insects and the pests to destroy it. And we see this play out. It's the great drama of the early gardener and many a farmer. And really, it comes down to the time of day of feeding and digestion. So if your plant is getting a lot of sun, then, and they can't digest it, see how there's peak photosynthesis, sugar transport, then cell division and sugar utilization. If they don't utilize the sugar in that day, it turns into a stress signal instead of a strength. So for me, this is like hits home. If you eat a big meal right before bed, you get indigestion. A lot of people get that. It's the best practice not to eat 3 hours before you go to bed. It's hard to do, but people swear by it. And I do it, and it makes a huge difference for me. But the plants are the same exact way. If they're photosynthesizing and they're not processing their sugars within the time allotted for them, they have to continue their journey. They don't have a choice. They're plants. The sun's going to come up again. And when you're powered by the ambient environment, you're unable to turn off that flow. And so it stacks up. So the reason there's so many monosaccharides is because it's not being able to process them fast enough into polysaccharides, and they're building up, leaking out of the plant, and they can be sensed up to kilometers away by the pests. And this is why the locust swarms come and they destroy the plants. So plants are primarily passive organisms, and unless they have internal and external biology helping them, they are vulnerable to attack. So they evolved, in other words, with these organisms in place because they're so passive. And people are like, oh no, they've got this immune reaction, they've got this. Those are all triggered by the biology. So without the biology there, it doesn't work. So what does this all mean? We need to help plants process and digest properly and completely. We need to think cyclically. We need to think about the plant's digestion. But wait, before we get any further, who am I? I am Matt Powers. I was a ski racer in New England. I became a musician in New York City. I played with people like this. That's Sean Pelton there with the hat on your right, I think, with the black hat. He's SNL's house drummer. He's still there. He's been there since the 90s when it was funny. But and then that's ZZ Top, Billy Gibbons. That was the day we met and we jammed on stage that same day at South by Southwest. Now I live in Texas. But back then, this was when I was starting out. I was a young man. This is 20 years ago. I met my wife and we got married. I knew she was my wife. It's a crazy story. I won't get into it, but I knew she was my wife 3 days in, 3 months in. I by accidentally asked her to marry me. I wanted to, but I like blurted it out, didn't plan. I just like said it. And she said yes. Then like 3 months later, we got married. Amazing. But then a year, no, I think 2 years into our marriage, with the when our firstborn child was about 1 year old, she got cancer, and James had to go stay with my sister-in-law, with her sister's family in Brooklyn, and she was at my mom's on the 3rd floor, and we had to be separate because she was radioactive. She lost her thyroid when she was 24, 25, I think 25. And it happened so long ago. Like, that's 15 years ago. So we didn't know better. We did everything the doctor said. They came in a suit carrying a box, and then opened the box and ran out. She's not in a suit. She just opened the inner box that's inside the box. They know that we ran out of the room. She's got to take the pill inside the box that she now has to open herself and then take the pill, which makes her radioactive, right? And so even her sweat, everything she touches is radioactive. Meanwhile, all the other Medicaid grandmas that are in there being like, honey, why are you doing it? What are you doing in here? Because this was back in the day when young people didn't get cancer. Things have changed now. It's gotten so much worse. But they're all going home on public transit, and everything they were touching was radioactive. And the number one prescribed drug in America was levothyroxine, thyroid hormone replacement drug. And I realized, like, in that moment, that we were exporting cancer and exporting damage on a systemic level. And I was like, and then I started asking questions, being like, how long are people radioactive? And I got 3 different answers from 3 different doctors. Asked about the safety for our baby, 3 different answers. And I realized I couldn't trust these people. And 3 months later, she got cancer again from the radiation that removed her thyroid. It caused another form of radiation. And I accused them of like it caught the procedure causing that, and they like wouldn't confirm, and they wouldn't look me in the eye, and they just like kind of left. And so it was a really hard time. And we basically had to figure it out for ourselves. And we left New York City. My wife prayed about it, and then I prayed about it, didn't like the answer, but the answer was we had to go. And I mean, I'm grateful now that we left, but it was so hard leaving that band. I was playing with Saturday Night Live's drummer. Rachel Ray's husband was the lead singer, and it was just a very easy job, playing rock and roll on the bass. Not too many notes, and so yeah, I was a little spoiled, you could say. I had like cars picking me up and I was flown all over to play gigs all over. Young man kind of went to my head. And then when I became a sub in Fresno, it was like the legs were like just knocked out from underneath me. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. It was humbling, but then at the same time, I was subbing in Fresno, and I saw that the way they were treating the kids, these kids were not getting a real education at Bullard High, Fresno High. I saw what they were doing to kids that needed to learn to read, and it was so counterproductive, harmful to the child. And I was so incensed by how they were treating people that needed help, that they were insulting them and basically like set it up for them to feel shame instead of learning to read. So I'll just tell you. So I was a sub. I come in and it's like ding 11:30. They're like taking out these like ratty old books and like children's books. I'm like, what is this? They're like, we got to read these, and they're like not reading them. They're just flipping through them like this, flip, 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 flip. And I'm like, this is weird, you guys. You don't have to do this. They're like, no, we have to do this. And I'm like, really? Because you're not reading. You're not learning to read. And in fact, this is a freaking insult. And I got all upset. Excuse me. And I they were like shocked. They were like, because no one had ever talked to them from like what matters to them, what's important to them, how their development actually matters. And it just tore me up. And I became a student advocate. And within the 3 years I was subbing, I became the favorite sub at some schools and the most hated sub at other schools where they're mistreating students, because I would tell the students like it is. I would show the students how to actually learn and how their teacher wasn't teaching them the right way, and I'm an English teacher. I'm talking about, this is a shocker, okay? When I introduced the basic outline for an essay, they call it the powers outline. They'd never seen such a thing. It was mortifying being a sub and then a full-time teacher initially in California. And then I just realized how bad the education system is. And I started teaching teachers because so much of what they're doing is just counterproductive. It just harms the child and doesn't recognize them, doesn't reach them. So I became a full-time teacher. This was made by one of my students. And actually the other logo is as well. So these are just gifts from my students, these images of me. I loved being a teacher. While that whole time period of me training and becoming a teacher, we had our second son. I started cooking while doing English, started growing food while I did English. We had a garden, an English garden, they jokingly said, because it wasn't like British in any sense. And so it was heirloom seeds, a lot of them Native American, because that's what grows well here, right? So yeah, I got addicted to seed saving and growing food and sharing that passion with others. And I started adapting things I didn't realize were impossible. This is a Peruvian highland corn. It's apparently I was the first person to grow it in cobs in America. And when I did this, it caused a huge stir. And I got like pulled in to the seed growing community. And even to this day, I am part of it because of this process. And I continue. I've got bags of it in that, and I'm in that fridge right there. And I'm starting a huge operation on this property that we'll talk about later in the presentation, that we're going to be regrowing this out. We're going to be growing the seed out, so I have a lot more seed. I got bitten by the permaculture bug. My mom was a teacher. My mom's mom was a teacher. And I think that epigenetics play a role in this. But permaculture, and then like my great grandfather was a gardener, and gardening is huge in my family. Painting is huge in my family. But permaculture like allowed me to be a teacher of things that were caring for the earth, caring for people. It like aligned so much of like with what I wanted to do to help people. And so I became, this wasn't done by a student. This is my first book. I got into permaculture, which is earth care, people care, and future care. And it's those three simple ethics. And I started growing like crazy. This is a food forest surrounded, and there's trees in there, but they're surrounded by annuals that are developing the soil, and I chop and drop them, right? And they protect the young forest at the same time. You can see how tall it is. That's like a 12-foot, in some places 16-foot tall plants, because it's on a hill going downward. So some of those things are many feet down from me. This is growing on 140-degree soils with no water, 3 months into throwing it on the ground, throwing the seed physically on the ground. Much of what I do is I disprove what's possible, what people think is possible, because think about it. I was a high school English teacher for sophomores in an area where the first book they ever read was The Hunger Games in 9th grade. I needed to show them that impossible things were possible. And so I just started doing things like that and living like that. And first of all, it's incredible how much nature wants to express. This is red Aztec spinach. So I reasoned using logic that if these were grown by the Aztec, they weren't like doing drip irrigation. So I threw them on the ground and walked away and said, this is going to work. And it did. and so we, part of its nature, part of it's knowing the history, part of it's all that work that the Aztec people and probably the people before them put into making this seed so strong and resilient. So this is some of the work I was doing when I launched my first book on Kickstarter as a demonstration to my students of what's possible. I was teaching small business and entrepreneurship to students in high school because I was at it was an Apple certified, Google certified high school that had all laptops, and it was entrepreneurship, video editing, software creation, music. I was a music teacher as well. And so I was digital music production actually. So it was a wild school, but it was, I mean, there was a school where I got Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto before I was allowed to teach in a classroom, to give you an idea of like how we were purposely trying to challenge the hidden curriculum in schools that is meant to dumb people down. And that's not me, that's the Ingalls principles that are laid down from the time, like I think 1906, the principles of secondary school, that Harvard, disseminated and helped set up all the high schools around. This is why you go to some areas and you get a completely different education than other areas. So we were on a mission to prove the impossible possible to our students, to model everything. And I was a little surprised how well this went. It had gotten funded in 3 days. It was the wildest experience ever. It was like, oh, I'm going to do this, and I think this is smart to do, and I'll just do this, and I'll ask this person like if they'll share it too. And it was like, boom. And it was like, holy cow, what just happened? And this was as much money as I was making after taxes in a year as a teacher, a full-time teacher with a master's degree in California. And so in my mind, I was like, well, I can quit teaching. I had a face plant very shortly after this, because I was like thinking like anything I could do will just blow up like this. And nope. That was a humbling experience, but I created these books. They went international. They went in different languages and translations. I started working with people all over the world, started speaking all over America. I started working in different sites all over, and I became in that process a citizen scientist. My boys are big now. My wife is a 6-time cancer survivor now. But we keep going, we keep figuring out every time, and we face these things. And in that process, I've written a few books. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey, but that really explains why I do what I do, because it's a bridge to that regenerative future. And I've lived these processes in trying to get the most nutritionally dense food, and then also make it possible so that other people can have these things as normal. And that's really what the regenerative future is, the regenerative economy. It's an economy where we are relying upon natural systems and cycles and partnering with them in such a way that we continuously improve the ecosystems and the natural capital that we all rely upon, such that it is self-healing, it is resilient, and to the degree and the range of expression, because there's a Goldilocks range of expression for everything, anti-fragile. So within that range of expression, it is pest resistant, disease resistant. So that future, that health for our plants and for our bodies, because that food begins to lend through the density and the nutritional levels, a different kind of diet, a different kind of health. And the limits of that, the potentials of that, we have yet to map. And that's what's so exciting. We have frontiers that are opening up right now. And that's what I was trying to get my students access to. And now I realize over the years, it's everyone access to this new way of doing things, which is all new. Everything can change. So let's get into this. What do I mean by regenerative, first of all? It's better and better over time and self-healing. And regenerative soil, that means self-healing abilities. And every season it's better. So why is this all important? If you master this, you'll unlock all the potential of your plants and soils. And so what we're going to learn today is the 5 indicators of soil, how to improve any soil, and how to grow faster growing, healthier, more productive, and more resilient plants. These things will change your life because it will save you time, money, energy, and effort. And you always have better plants and soil every season. And you're going to be able to apply this at any scale. So if you're a farmer listening, this is legitimately going to work for you. I've got the calculations. I've got recipes to scale, to tonnage, to acreage. And I've got the proven case studies, and I've got it all. So let's just get into it, because you can make this happen. And this is my story. I started off in Central Valley, California, where it's brittle Mediterranean temperate climate. And this is where all those fires are. So you can see through the landscape. You don't see baby trees. You just see grasslands and really weeds showing up. It's bald. Between the bark beetle and the fires, the bark beetle's in red, the fires are the see-through part. We've got a serious situation there. And that's happening above us for the most part, and comes down. We were in the foothills. We were on this decomposed granite stuff. And it's oxidized and it's alkaline. And it's 140-degree soils, like I said. You guys see that? Yep. The Sierra Nevadas and water. Let's talk about it. The reality is California has, in 2 generations, destroyed paradise. Tulare Lake was the largest body of water west of the Mississippi, and it was right smack dab in the middle of the Central Valley, where Tulare is, where cuties are from. You know, the little things. They don't have water in the aquifer beneath them now. So the employees of cuties have, hard time. They have to bring in their own water. Bathing is difficult. Outbreaks happen in these areas because, and they talk about like E. coli and all these pathogens and stuff. Well, there's reasons. They don't have water. Sanitation is difficult in an area when you don't have water. Especially when it's so hot, and you're taking your potable water in plastic containers out into the middle of the fields for people to wash their hands with. But they're doing an effort. It's just not thought through, right? So it's a disaster site in many ways. They drained this Tulare Lake. They built a city on it. This used to flood all the way up to Sacramento every year. That much water. It was a duck and fish paradise. It was like Disneyland for hunters. They got rid of that. They actually set up dams like Key Point, like acupuncture, all along the spine of the Sierra Nevadas, up and down, and then drained all that water in open concrete channels all the way down the mountain. Pipes down the mountain. And they ran the pipes with turbines, and then charged people for the electricity. And then they were stealing their water. They took all the water out of the foothills. So all those fires in the foothills were directly caused by the fact that they removed for decades the actual water that was supposed to be the runoff that fed those hills and hydrated all those hills. So you go to the creek behind my grandma Rosie's house. Well, it's my grandma-in-law, but Grandma Rosie's house, where I raised my boys, has a creek that's 25 feet deep, cut through the granite, that never gets more than a few feet deep, but it's usually dry. This is a man-made ecological disaster. So what I did to do was I slowed down the rainwater that did arrive. I put in swales, and I started planting with legumes and nitrogen fixers, covered it with cardboard, planted trees. My boys were young. And it grew crazy and amazing. And you can see where the soil is changing color. that darker color is from all the humic acids, from all the carbonaceous compounds traveling through the soil, accumulating. And you, yeah, I know my amaranth, I got known for this orange giant amaranth. It looks a lot like the truffula tree, you know, from Dr. Seuss. And the reality is, why are these so big? Well, because it was so oxidized and alkaline. Those plants thrive, those non-mycorrhizal plants like beets, they thrive in those soils. And what did I do to really make things go so big? On top of that was compost and compost tea. I planted nitrogen fixers and a huge diversity. That's me again. So Governor's Island, this is another place where we see huge success when we think about the soil. So it used to be this site where there was like these army barracks, and then it was transformed. And Dr. Lane Ingham, one of my soil mentors, was an advisor for Todd Harrington in this process, but they transformed it into a native forest with compost and mycorrhizae. And it's important to notice that it was mycorrhizae, but it was compost that was designed for native forest. And then a company came along and decided to put camping in there. So there's actually a forest campground where people can go and appreciate in New York City now. And what's wilder is my best man from my wedding, who I grew up ski racing with and learning to ski with since I was 2, was the person who put the camping in there. Didn't even know it. It all happened. Elaine was there first, helping Todd Harrington, and then Peter was there later. It's just wild. Now, terra preta. 10,000 years ago in the Amazon, there was an ancient corn called teosinte. It was wild. Not like that. Like that. Doesn't really look like corn. I know, but you could make beer out of it. So that's why they were into it. So they would throw these big parties. They would light these big fires. They'd have these pits full of these like burning embers. And then over those pits, they would in giant clay containers, they would be lightly simmering the fermenting corn. I know you're like, simmering, what's happening? It's bizarre. But they were lightly simmering, which would wake up the lactic acid bacteria. And they were making beer. So there was yeasts. And they were also had these clay pots that broke quite often. And then all that liquid would go down onto the fire and make biochar with those specific microbes. And then they would turn it into a compost heap latrine, mixing the fish bones, their food waste, all of it in there. And then they would cap it. And they did this over and over again. And then the microbes became more uniform and adapted. They became to the soils themselves began to expect this, because it was ritual, it was society wide, it was cultural, it was all over the Amazon. And they started transforming all the soils. And it started spreading, and it actually is self-healing now. It's regenerative. If you go and take away everything but the last 10 centimeters of terra preta, it regrows if you just keep laying organic matter on it. And people do this in Brazil. They sell it. So these were compost-related corn beer parties, believe it or not. They were. And it resulted in soils that to this day just are incredible and defy our understanding of typical tropical soils. So 5 cousins, sheet composting with biochar and EM is a way that we can imitate this process in miniature on our own sites. And so I did this. This is just being burned and regrowing. This is after a fire in an area. Notice the ashen layer, the actinobacterial layer there, how it goes from char immediately to clay. There's really not very much soil difference. There's not really much soil layer. We're going to look at the difference between that soil, that soil in a jar soil test, and this soil, okay? This is a different area, very similar area, very close to each other. But this is an area where I did 5 cousins and chopped and dropped. And now we look closer and we can see that there's not a clear like difference between the top of the soil and the bottom of the soil. There is some char in there. You see that? I added some char, but I think there is some char everywhere because there's fires. And then there's bits of pottery in there as well, which is fascinating. And so and this is a site that I did all these things on it, and then the pottery I didn't add. I'm just gonna say. So it's wild that it lends itself so well to this. But I was just in Sonoma County working, and there's constant fires. People using terracotta pots all the time. They fleck off, you know. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But Terra Preta has that too. So it's perfect for this example. But you can see how there's so much connective tissue. There's all these wispy roots. And some of that, the smaller stuff is going to be mycorrhizal. And it'll be just the same looking, but it's too small to see unless it's like saprophytic and it's digesting something. And then we can usually see those. If it's a large enough piece, like a chunk of wood or something. But we've all seen white rot fungi. So that's what I'm referring to. Now look at this. The one on the left is the one that had just the burn and then the clay, no soil creation. And then the one on the right is the cover crop. Notice how the humic compounds have changed the color of the sand themselves, the sand itself. The water is a little bit different color. The amount of organic matter is also dramatically different. So this is what's going on. We are able to have so much more carbon glommed in there. That's what the darker the soils are. And we have so much more structure. Let's look at another example, Singing Frog Farm. They went from 2% to 12% in only 12 years. This is also Sonoma County. They did compost, perennial hedgerows, no-till, and subtle earthworks. And yes, they're disturbing the soil when they install new transplants and adding compost. So I guess you could say they're hand till a little bit, but they're not using a machine to till it and pulverize the soil. So that's what we mean. So what made these examples successful is that they all recognized that they needed the organic matter, but they needed the soil biology to process it and manage it. And they needed cover crops and to partner with the biology and feed the biology. And they needed the right minerals in there to do all those photosynthetic processes. And in fact, it's specific minerals that are in abundance that are required for plant to properly digest their carbon and their nitrogen. But the higher levels of expression of taste and smell and nutritional density and plant secondary metabolites, that's all driven by the soil biology after your minerals are at coherence, which means that they're getting along and they're buffered enough so everyone's accessible in the right amounts. There's a Goldilocks range that we're headed for, and that's why we've got these overlaps of all these different factors here. So why do people fail? Well, they get into that tillage, and yes, if you're establishing, you're gonna till. Why? Because you might have a toxic till pan that's solid, that's anaerobic, that you need to break up, and you need to re-inoculate, and you need to amend with minerals and compost and all these things, and just break it up, and then you're basically doing remediation, right? So yeah, you might need to do that first, but you don't do it every time. You don't do it all the time. David Holmgren's calcium and magnesium ratio failed. He turned his soil into concrete. But he recommends my book now. He loves it. He's getting great success with it. So we'll talk about more of that later. Composting confusion. People get all confused about compost and then use toxic compost. Redox confusion. People don't understand the importance of understanding oxidation is the loss of energy. Reduction is the gain of energy. But oxidation is commonly drying and reduction is commonly wet, except when it isn't. And that's where the confusion comes in. People can have acidic soils that are driven by the minerals, not by water, and they can be dry. Uh-huh. So this is why it's really important, because people will be like, I don't understand. I've read all the books. I've done all the things. Why is this amendment doing the opposite of what I thought it should do? To redox confusion. Chemistry fears. People are like, oh no. I remember chemistry. I don't do chemistry. Elaine Ingham told me no. I just need biology. The reality is they do biochemistry. So it's simply a language. I'm not talking about what Elaine's talking about, which is using the chemistry, chemical, ag solutions for things, because I completely agree with her. Don't do that. But that just shouldn't make us afraid of chemistry, which is a language, because biochemistry is the language of the microbes. So, and Elaine was totally not saying to be afraid of biochemistry. No. And I completely agree with what she was saying, but people get it confused and they go all in on their confusion. So I just want to pull that back out and fix that. And the same thing goes for microscopes. You might have, like, if only I had this, if only, you know what I mean? And the reality is you can get a cheap microscope, and soon regenerative soil microscopy will be available, and soon the regenerative soil database will be available. And so it'll change everything. You won't even need a microscope, you know what I mean, to begin your learning. You could be learning the microbes before even getting the microscope, because you'll have a database that's open to the public. You may be saving up and then getting it. So it's about to change. It's the way it's been done and the way information's been handled is about to change. So we're gonna have community solutions around this. We'll talk about that more later. So you're not gonna fail. There's communities around this. They're in place. They're ready to help. And there's truth. There's verifiable truth. And there's also, what's so great is there's so many ways that these things work. And 10 years ago, you had all these people being like, no, my way is the only way. And there's principles underneath why your way works in your northern, Pacific Northwest climate. And there's reasons why yours works in, your Australian climate. Like, there's reasons. And understanding there's reasons is the way we build bridges. And so that's really what I'm about. Remember, I'm a high school teacher. I had to teach everyone's kids. And for me, that means that I needed to have no prejudice or prior conceptions, or like, even if a kid is not like kind of like personality, like that, like I would normally like or something, that's my job. And I really feel like we need to create systems that just help everyone, that actually allow people to improve their lives and improve the lives of the people around them. So we're going to do that, that's what our soil, we'll get into that. That's what our soil database is all about. So let's dig deeper into this. Air and water, I said, right? Well, that's just nitrogen and carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, it's a little bit more, but those in combination are actually organic. Like all organic matter is those combination. So the air has all the elements for life. Let me say it again. All biological matter, all life, all organic molecules requires carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And it's already in the air. So the carbon cycle, photosynthesis, all of this has to do with creating more life. And notice that, we do 7 gigatons of CO2 release. That might be a little bit more now. This is based off of the Cambridge University Press global warming well, it's actually a combination of things, but the number, the 7 gigatons, it was from global warming, the Cambridge University Press release. And if you look down there, the fungi release, it's 85 gigatons. And so it's really important to understand that we actually need to cycle more carbon. And if we are more efficiently cycling carbon through photosynthesis, it actually looks like less carbon is in the air, even though we have more cycling through. And why do I say we need more? Because the soils of the past had way more. And the reason it never reached the ice cores for them to measure is forests were in place, grasslands were in place, plants were everywhere. And the way, CO2 is heavier than O2, O2 rises, CO2 falls. And yeah, heat from our breath when we're out in, heat rises. But if you wait long enough, you can watch your breath in the frozen air, the moisture start to descend as well. So if you're in a cold enough place. And so this is really important to understand. We need to bring back the soils, but that means we need to also bring back all the photosynthetic capacity. We've lost 90% of the photosynthetic capacity of the West Coast because the West Coast, like the actual water, because most of 50 to 75% of the oxygen on our planet is coming from the oceans. And so them losing their kelp forests is losing all that oxygen release that we all rely upon. So it's really important that we don't break the photosynthetic cycle. We need the CO2 to go in there to release CO2 so we can breathe. So there's so much confusion about this. People don't think about this from a cyclical perspective, and they don't realize that like oxygen generation is at an all-time low. And people have been ringing the bell about global oxygen levels declining for the past 150 years dramatically, which is plants. And then it's also having the fungi in the soil. So the fungi are releasing the carbon dioxide in the soil onto the plant leaves from below, and the plants are cycling it back in like toroidal engines, and it doesn't leave the forest. The reason it smells so crispy when you're going into the forest is because it's constantly releasing that oxygen, right? And all the CO2 that's being released is being trapped again by those plants and captured every step, everything. And the layers, the canopies make it so that they don't get out. The carbon's not getting out. That's why particularly why these areas are so strongly releasing oxygen. So it's this cyclical picture that is missing from all the dialogues, all the mainstream reports and on things. And it's not surprising because no one until my book mapped out visually and even some of them I had to take several different graduate school studies and combine them to get the mapping done. So realistically, like they've never even seen things from this perspective, and they're also just doing what they're told. So hydrogen cycle, it's the same thing. This is the seat of pH, and no one ever talks about that because pH is the range of H plus to OH negative, hydrogen protons to hydroxide, and those hydrogen protons are energy. And then there's the nitrogen cycle. Did you know that plants can fix, and it actually looks more and more like all plants, if they're inoculated properly, can fix nitrogen from the air? Yeah. It's stunning what is actually possible. And so photosynthesis plus plant roots actually is taking the energy from the sky. I mean, from the sun in the sky and putting it into the earth. And it's this process of adding energy that's called reduction. And it makes for more well-structured soil that's high in organic matter. And the organic matter is holding those protons from the roots. from photosynthesis from the sun. And the organic matter is made out of the carbon chains that they're releasing as sugar. So when we put these things together, the largest carbon sink on Earth is the soil. All the soils were once dark and rich in the Midwest of America and many of the places along the. I mean, George Washington thought America was going to fall because of soil loss. He was obsessed with contour tillage, tilling on contour like swales. When he and that was what he and Thomas Jefferson, like the one thing they agreed upon was that the American farmers were destroying their legacy, and that's the only reason they had to go west and take more land. It's fascinating if you read Dirt, Erosion of Civilizations by Professor David Montgomery. It goes through all of this. So this diagram is based on Olivier Husson's work. I just wanted to clarify that. But the reality is, if we see things from a cyclical perspective and a historical perspective, we understand how to put things back together very quickly. So it's those protons versus the hydroxide and soil minerals. Did you guys know that molybdenum is required for nitrogen fixation? If you're low in Mo, you're not going to have nitrogen fixation happen. So if you've got a really crispy field that's just been tilled and tilled and tilled and taking and taking and taking, all the nutrients are just taken out every season, just taken out and sold. And you just been throwing NPK in there. That soil might not have enough Mo to properly nitrogen fix, and you could do a cover crop and like hope that goes well, and it just doesn't. And you're like, these organic farmers don't know what they're talking about, but it's actually just because we haven't gone deep enough. And that's the thing, is so many people, the reason they fail is they don't do enough testing and don't go to a cyclical, like cycle-based way of thinking. And when everything I do, I go down to the natural principles at work. How does nature do it? How did that get there in the first place? What are plants utilizing? What process in plants does this feed into? And I let the plants teach me, let the soil teach me, let the microbes teach me. Because and then keep an open mind, because these diagrams that I've made have continuously taught me, because they're diagrams of what's actual rather than a slice of what I'm trying to communicate or my opinion. They're these actual processes. And the more we look at them, the more we talk about them in my communities and courses, the more we realize. And people are like, hey, what about this? Have you thought about, do you know what that means? And when it rains, and like all that kind of stuff. So soil mineral deficiency and antagonisms are often the limiting factor when everything else seems right. And that's because they fight. When you don't have enough organic matter, they fight. So cobalt, there's no pure form of cobalt available anywhere in the world. It's always going to bond to something else. It's always going to oxidize or be, in the water. And so we really need to make sure that we have it there, because it is the centerpiece of B12, and your microbes will not survive without cobalt. So, soil organic matter, again, it's life. It's the biological matter. If you bring in biochar, it's a magnet. It's pure carbon, and it will hold organic matter for you. It'll hold water, it'll hold life. Organic matter does all these things too, but because of the magnetic quality of biochar, it's going to hold more. And that's because it's just hungry. We've stripped everything off of it, so it's like pure carbon. So it's like, it's like 90% carbon. And then it's the same thing with synthetic nitrogen. It's, I want to bond with you. And so it strips everything in the soil and destroys your soil organic matter. And that's what your plants are slurping up, is the destruction of your soil. And it works well for a few seasons, but works only well for your sales, and then your soil's dead. You can't grow more plants, And while you try to figure it out, your customers are going to someone else. So we need regenerative soils that are continuously self-healing. They are able to be fully buffered, so they stay in that Goldilocks zone. Soil biology is the key to all this. This is the soil food web. So I created this to really color coordinate and communicate the waste streams, the beneficial exchanges, how plants feed, and then what's consumed by what. So this was everything in here is cited and has been gone over in detail. So the traditional way that Dr. Lane Ingham's soil food web folks will teach it is that plants put out the cakes and cookies, the bacteria and fungi eat it, the protozoa and nematodes feed on those, and nematodes feed on themselves and protozoa, and it's the waste from all of them that feeds the plant. Not quite. That's just an oversimplification. The reality is a little bit more complicated. The reality is that they're putting out if they're putting out cakes and cookies, it's like Hansel and Gretel, and they are bringing those microbes in and killing them. So the reality is the rhizophagy cycle, roots seek out and eat microbes and then farm them. So they are taking in microbes through the meristem cells, and they're bombarding them. They're oxidizing them and then taking their nutrients that way, and then releasing them through the root hairs. And if you don't have microbes doing this process, you don't have root hairs. I'll say it again. If we don't have living soil, root hairs don't develop, because all roots fundamentally eat simple bacteria and fungi as part of their developmental and growth processes. So this happens from the moment the root leaves the seed. And then photosynthesis, always back to photosynthesis. So these plants are also feeding through their roots through arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and through this is actually endomycorrhizal fungi, which is arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, and then below is ectomycorrhizal fungi, and they also feed through rhizobia. These are rhizospheric, right? Rhizo is root. These are root bacteria that form nodules and live inside the roots, and they make a variety of things, amino acids, and they feed this back up into the plant. So it's an incredible, and also ammonia. It's an incredible process. They're factories for making nitrogen more bioavailable for the plant, and it pulls it from the air. So it doesn't even matter what's in your soil. It's pulling it from the air, and the interstitial spaces in your soil is where that air is coming from. So these microbes are traveling in the phloem of the plant, from the leaves all the way through the stem, all the way down to the roots. So they're throughout the plant, and they are on all surfaces of the plant. And these are biofertilizers, biostimulants, biocontrol, buffers, and filters. Soil biology has the greatest effect on soil pH and EH and nutrition. EH is redox. That's an image of beneficial fungi. You can see the segments very clearly. You can see how beautiful the color is. This is a much easier way to measure it. I color coordinated it, always color coordinating, because it really communicates very simply how, we take the straightest parts and segments, and we just drag them over, keeping their size correct. And we measure them on a grid, and we can measure the diameter very easily. Yeah, so this is the work I do with microscopy. We can show rhizophagy in action. This is root hair. That's the bacteria. That's it being expelled, sent back after it's been bombarded and drained. We can see fungi digesting wood. Those are the spores. You can see incredible things in the dark field. The sparkling. You guys see that sparkling? That's bacteria. It's a piece of wood. Yeah. So this is some of the work I do. Those glowing marks are a sign that it's a fungal feeder. But a lot of people would think that we know a lot about our world beneath our feet, but we don't. We've only characterized 1 to 2% of the soil microbes. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. That's why the R soil database is something I keep talking about. And DNA testing is revealing a lot more. I've been working with the MinION from Oxford Nanopore. And when we apply all these things, let me go back to that. So I've been double checking all these things. So as I do these tests, as we like look at things under the microscope, I'm DNA testing it. And that way we can actually verify these things, because most people have been doing things traditionally without verifying. They're just flying blind and kind of speaking confidently about things that they shouldn't be. And I've been finding a lot out with the DNA testing. And that's why my new microscopy book has that as me checking everything using this. And then I'm writing regenerative soil DNA next. So how does this all gather momentum? You've shown me a lot of things, Matt. Well, in my book, Regenerative Soil, and in my courses, it all boils down to this. We go through everything. We go through the history. We go through the physics, the minerals, the chemistry, the biology, then and the plant biology, the physiology, and how they all interact. And then we boil it all down to actions that we can take and the tests that we can take that will give us the specific answers that we need to develop this plan. And so this plan is your soil organic matter solutions, your mineral amendments, your biofertilizers and the biostimulants, aka your biology, and your cover crops, and then the aeration and hydration plans. So the types you need, the amounts you need, and your duration and timing. And you can span this across your season, across your year, for a specific crop plan or for the way you manage your farm. And we cover everything. Those are the five leaves that we originally talked about when we talked about that overlap. And it all starts with that photosynthesis. So what can we expect? Well, pest infection, virus and disease immunity, high nutrient density, faster maturation rates, and higher yields. Sometimes up to 40 to 50% in 40% less time. Increased secondary metabolites and aromatics. It's going to taste and smell better than anything you've ever tasted before. And then a massive decrease in fertilizer inputs. Folks are able to decrease it so much that they can switch from the purified synthetics, because they don't need so much, to more natural sources, because they don't need the extra strength, fertilizer. They can go with the easier, the softer, the lighter, the less strong manure, because it comes as and you have also the bonus of it bringing organic matter. So people are reevaluating everything. And you might, we're going to see things change very rapidly, because of I'm already seeing things change, but things are going to change even more. And you guys are going to see why. And it's less work over time. And it's just that simple. The plant roots, the minerals, the organic matter, the soil biology, the air and the water. That is regenerative soil. So let's one final thing. What makes an old battery no longer hold its charge? The differential's gone. Everything is about differentials. Positively charged sky and negatively charged ground. That's why we go and we do earthing. We get negative ions from the ground. Did you guys know that this is real? I was like, and then there was this an Iowa doctor that ran an entire hospital that I did an interview with, and he explained that it's easily provable. You instantly have a change in your blood pressure Like instantaneously, your blood pressure goes boom. And so he's like, listen, I got to have people barefoot walking in a forest, like leave the hospital, go into a forest, and then come back to the hospital so that they get better faster. This will save my hospital so much money. This guy was pragmatic. And so I did all the research, and it's all true. And what's wild is that compost is negatively charged. That's why it holds all the cations, which are positively charged, because the opposites attract, right? We know that from our plants. It's, I mean, the protons from the plants are what they hold, but the cations that they hold are taken up by the plants, and it's the protons that displace the cations on the organic matter. Cations are the nutrients, and that's how they're released. And we'll talk about that in a second, I think. So the sky is supposed to be oxygen rich. The ground is supposed to be carbon rich. These differentials. But when we till, we send the carbon up into the sky and we actually oxidize the soil. The Fenton reaction occurs. It's the oxidation of soils and loss of nutrients. So they leave it bare, and it, and then we have these large stretches of uniformity, actually large stretches of death. Now there are pesticides and fungicides and insecticides also kill the soil life and destroy the soil organic matter, a third of which is fungi, because the soil organic matter is also the organic life. And this is the thing, is they've got such a broken understanding on both ends of like the mainstream. They're like, no, we can do this forever and destroy things. And the other was like, no, we've got to just focus on like carbon credits and stuff like that. And it's no, because the reality is, those measurements, you can only do it from the soil, and there's limits, and there's different kinds of carbon, and there's different like life cycles for carbon in the soil. So it's really important that we actually focus on the holistic picture around soil, holistic picture around carbon, and fix that, of course, but then turn around and look at the real issues around pollution, around the way that we're handling our coastlines, because we're killing off all the plants in the oceans that are actually making the majority of our oxygen. So this is what synthetic nitrogen does. There was a myth out there that they thought that the fertilizer could help, but it's actually it depletes soil carbon, it's destroying it, it undermines soil health. They're draining the soil of energy and life, but we can fix that. And water is also energy. pH is linked to humidity and soil moisture always. Remember those protons I was talking about? That's energy. Okay. And for every 1% increase in soil organic matter, you're able to hold an additional 20,000 gallons of plant available water in the top foot per acre of land. So that's absolutely incredible. That means that like all these things are synergetic. They're going to work together, and it's not subtle. It flips. It goes from wet to dry. It goes from pH acidic to pH alkaline, or the reverse, whether we're desertifying or repairing. It's a flip, not a gradual change. The differential is everything to nature, and so it reinforces it. We just have to put the effort in to restore our forests, our grasslands, our kelp forests, I mean, we can even regrow the coral reefs. I write about that in the permaculture student too. The reality is that most of these things, people don't know that they can participate in them. People don't know what's possible because it's kept out of the mainstream media. That's why I do my annual conference where we talk about regenerative entrepreneurship, and we showcase all the amazing people doing this all over the world, because people are doing it. So it's electric, it all has polarity, and it all powers life. So energize your soils, bring the fertility back, hold more water. You may ask yourself, what do you do on your own sites? Well, like I said, I changed that soil from this to this, right? That's what I'm talking about. That was 3 months. It's compost tea and compost, nitrogen fixing legumes, diversity, real diversity. earthworks, got to slow that water down. And look how much carbon I'm adding, right? Cover crops. We're gonna be pumping in all those sugars in there. But then we moved. I moved to Missouri and I started representing Baker Creek. Then we moved again. I represented World Beat Center and Balboa Park. I expanded their food forest. And then we moved again. I designed a food forest on a mountainside in Washington outside Seattle. And I got really into effective microbes, started using EM, and EM can increase your soil organic matter by 0.5% in 2 months. And people were doing this, farmers were doing this in Arizona where it's oxidized and dry without changing anything. So they added effective microbes, which effective microbes, everyone can buy this, or you can make a biofertilizer equivalent yourself. But these microbes, which are lactobacillus, lactic acid bacteria, actinobacteria, yeasts, and purple non-sulfur bacteria, they together, like streptomyces, and then like rhodocytomonas palustris, they work together and they were using synthetic nitrogen and they were able to stop the destruction because the microbes are so powerful. So to help people transition, this is an incredible thing to know. So this is that site, that's one growing season. It went from this to that one growing season. It's how we do it. Make people happy. It's my son, my youngest. And then we moved again. Sonoma. And I got into doing 5 cousins, a lot more inoculation, a lot more chop and drop. I actually, we chop and drop acres on this site. Lots of comfrey, lots of biochar and bone char. We started doing rock dust at that point. And that's some of the purple corn I was working with there. I created that. I love how it's like lipstick almost. Yeah, I love getting colors that no one else has. The crazy thing about corn is there's the color beneath and there's the color on top because they have a seed coat that's a color. And so that purple, those purple stripes that are on top of the white, that's actually the purple anthocyanin blushes in the seed coat, I mean. So I was all into that, doing all that. And then I wrote this book, Regenerative Soil, and it changed everything. And you're like, wait, but I began to understand things at a different level. And I've been telling you about this book this entire time. All the images you've seen are from that book. I made it all visual. I did all the cycles for all the plant essential nutrients. And then we moved and began to expand my testing to everything. Started getting into DNA testing. I got an epifluorescence microscope. Epifluorescence allows me to view things in a different frequency, right? So really, really vital. And so then we were in San Marcos. We're doing lots of compost. Look at the big leaves on that cowpea, happy cowpea. Lots of really cool compost. I was spiking the compost with all the incredible ingredients and all the incredible insights that are in regenerative soil. And then we moved again for the final time to the most perfect permaculture site, 24 acres near Austin, Texas. This is what I'm establishing right now. I've planted the field to the right. It's fenced in, and I've got a cover crop coming up. We had that killing frost that came in that was nuts, but things have rebounded from that. I planted the field to the left. Half of it is planted and prepared. The other half is still in development. We have to do more biochar and till it in that area. So this is a whole in progress project, and we're even going to do giant swales and a huge pond on the site. So there's so much more to come. But in the process of moving, I felt compelled to launch this book and course and database. And as you can see, it went really, really, really well because I hit upon something that was an empty space again. Just like when my first book came out and there was nothing on permaculture for K through 12 ever written, I did that. And then I went on to create the permaculture education standards. And then I created all the standard-based education so that it could be adopted. And then it was adopted and then it became accredited. So for high schoolers. And so it was just one of those things. It just exploded. And this is another one of those things where I found an empty space and just touched it. And well, let's get into it, because this is the second in the trilogy for Regenerative Soil. And so it's all the protocols, morphological guides, so you know which fungi is which microbe is which bacteria is which. So I'm making microbial profiles that go along with the protocols. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun. In fact, this is something I'm looking at right now behind us. This is IMO 1 from an incredible collection down in Houston. So all I can say is dig into microscopy, because there is so much to be learned there. And it's exciting. And you can participate once you do in the Our Soil database, which is, it's not up yet, but we've got an incredible person that's a database expert that is helping us. They offered to do it free. I was like, no, we're going to pay you because we want it done faster. And they were like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? But that's the thing, is their heart is in the right place. They believe in this. And what is this? Well, it's the first place ever that we can create an open, transparent library for our soil test results, so that we can compare them over time to our own test results, but also to our bioregion and to the world. And the thing is, holistic 360 testing is really not done. People do mineral testing, or they do a biology test, or maybe they'll do bricks, but they never put them together and look at it as a system, and then look at it through the cycles and try to understand it. And that's really what we need to do. We also need to map things over time. When we need to think about things as, how do we highlight people for doing the right thing? So we're going to have a top 10. Highest organic matter levels of soils, highest rated members for their interpretation work or for their images or videos. And the global organic matter average percentage. Is it going up? Is it going down? We got to make it go up. We got to have it go way up, and this is the movement. This is what it's all about. So, because the organic matter is the buffer, is the housing for all that life, and it's the greatest indicator of the soil health that we have. And so we can take in regular normal tests down to the ppm and pH and CEC and all those things that we know, but we can also take in all the other tests and map them out and really see things for what they are. And we can even compare our own entries and get communities like learning. So we can learn as a community. We can see how other people are rated for their entries, and we can get that feedback going so that good, better, best can be achieved. And then I've gotten new tests. I've gotten the bionutrient meter, and I'm going to be adding all of those in. We started this auto composter. We're still unpacking. I've got all these things I want to set up. And the reality is, what I've been teaching you today really can double your harvests. People that just use the book at the university, Utah State University, in their permaculture garden, they already were doing permaculture. They already were doing best practices, right? Then they applied my book, just the book, and doubled their harvest. And they were giving their harvest, the best part. They were giving their harvest to people who are hungry and to food banks. So the best food, helping the people who really need it. Just I love this. So this is the thing. This is something you can hang your hat on. This is something that farmers are using, market gardeners are using, cannabis cultivators are using. And believe me, because of the testing done on cannabis cultivation, you don't get recommended by top cultivators unless you get the results. And you get those high terpene rates, you get those, like, for real though. They're the ones that are able to pay for the highest levels of testing, that now grape farmers are doing the same exact testings for wine. it's fascinating. We're having a trickle down of these testing, plant sap analysis, all these kinds of things that are really expensive right now, starting to trickle down. So in 5 to 10 years, you're going to have a whole lot more information about the health of all plants that you buy. And there's going to be rating systems. There's going to be pocket, like meters that attach to your cell phone and can read things. You name it. I know the people developing them right now. So just hold your breath and you'll see the world change before your eyes. So this book, Regenerative Soil, changed my life, changed all my understanding of how the world operates, how all these narratives are like little pinholes, or like they're looking through the keyhole into the room when they need to open the door and then engage with the complexity of our systems. And only when we engage with the complexity of our systems and understand things at a cyclical level will we actually regeneratively interact with them. And that's what really needs to happen. And so we need to partner with the soil food web. We need to understand what redox is. This is the first time the EH charts have ever been released in a book. The green shows you where things are bioavailable. The lighter green obviously is like, quasi desirable, right? Because too many nitrates is sick plant, right? And not good for us to eat, but we need nitrates in vegetative states. So I've actually mapped out all of this in the book, all the cycles in the book, as well as what to do when there's toxicity or deficiency, what to add, what are natural sources of magnesium, natural ways to control toxicity. And then all of the actual actions and solutions are in there from all the different natural perspectives, regenerative ag perspectives, down to the actual recipes for how to grow the microbes yourself so that you don't have to buy them on the internet from someone else and trust them. You can do it yourself and verify it. Well, who else is doing this? Well, Chris Trump, and he's traveling all over the world, helping farmers all over the world. And his reputation is the only way he gets to that next farm. And so he's doing it. His people are wildly successful. And he's a microbe farmer when it comes down to it. He uses a microscope. He makes incredible natural farming, green natural farming composts and preps. He is a master at this. John Kemp's record of success. John Kemp was fundamental in helping me develop my understanding in all of these modalities. And then I was able to connect all these things. And also John has tens of thousands of actual test results based off of these things. So he has a giant library, and my whole thing is I want to convince him to like basically have an intern just enter those test results into my database. It's a conversation I had to have with him, but John and I are good friends. We talk all the time. He sends me like pictures of his baby. Don't tell anyone that he sends me pictures of his baby. You're not supposed to take pictures of him. But it's just friends. We're just friends, but we're really good friends. We talk about everything under the sun. Everything under the sun. So John's an incredible guy. John's helping people who have been really entrenched in the chemical ag world switch to regenerative ag, and they're getting off the chemicals. Their soil's incredible. They've got biology going, and they're making more money, and they're happy. So John is such an incredible leader in this, and his success rate is humbling. It's stunning. If you guys haven't had John on, I know that you won't be able to see his face if you have him on, but have him on. It is worth it. So yeah, he is someone that will blow your socks off, because he, like I said, he's walking the walk. And he can certainly talk the talk. He's a very entertaining guy too. And Elaine Ingham's record of success as well. And I know Elaine's very niche. Elaine's doing the thermophilic compost. Elaine's doing her compost teas and all that. But it does work. And there are caveats, there are conditions, there are reasons why it works to the range and not over here. And I explore that in my work as well. But her record of success is based upon biology as well. And all this can be scaled down to the garden or up to farm scale. So you can absolutely do this. So what if your soil improved every season significantly? That's what regenerative soil is. And you can join us in Regenerative Soil, the online 20-week course at any point. It's self-paced, and I do lifetime access so that you can go through it as many times as you like, and you can go through it live with me. And I do live Q&A sessions for 20 weeks, 2 to 3 times a year. So, and you can go in every single one of them, or only once, or one, and then a few years later, join in again. It's completely up to you. It's about getting more carbon, more organic matter in the soil, increasing your biology, getting those nutritionally dense plants, getting past the poisons and the toxins, increasing water holding capacity and saving money and getting higher yields. And we have people all over the world, and we've got experts from all over the world who are doing this, who are living this, who are co-teaching in this course. And we're connecting and combining the soil food web approach that Elaine pioneered, Korean natural farming, which Master Cho pioneered, regenerative ag, which so many people helped contribute to, biochar, biofertilizers, mineral science, fourth phase water, EM, fermentations, holistic management, Michael Phillips' work, and so much more. And it's based on thousands of studies, hundreds of books, dozens of experts, and over a dozen peer reviewers. So I have peer reviewers who go over all my work from respective universities all over the world, as well as farmers and researchers. So you can sign up today and you can start at any time. There's special bonuses, there's payment plans, there's all these wonderful things. If you go to regenerativesoilscience.com, you can check all of that out. Join us this year, regenerativesoilscience.com. And later this month, I'm hosting our Regenerative Future, which is a conference I do every year. This is our 3rd year. We're doing over 60 live giveaways of products from all those folks down at the bottom there. And we have digital goodie bags for everyone to participate in. It's a free event. It's an incredible event. You can go to r-future.world, and that will, it's actually a lead link. It transforms into an HTTPS thing. But you just put that in there and it just takes you there. So r-future.world. And that's a free conference. It's a 5-day conference, 35 plus speakers. When I talk about regenerative entrepreneurship, this is what I'm talking about. These are the people that are incredible examples of that. And this is a great place to get more information and network with people. And also to get your start in forming your plan and launching it. That is happening on the 19th. So join us for 5 days of hope and inspiration to get recharged for 2023. All free. Though you can take it home with you if you want to do that route. That is also an option. So sign up there at rfuture.world. So without any further ado, do you have any soil questions? Let's get you those answers. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you, Matt. And yeah, definitely there are a lot of questions coming in. Thank you for that insightful presentation. It's really cool to hear a kind of story-driven, holistic approach to this to understand a bit more about you and what people are doing. Before I go on, though, I do want to plug our next upcoming webinar. You got your plug in, so we're going to get ours, So on Tuesday, February 6th, we'll be hosting Dr. Jane Lucas, who will kind of keep in the theme of soil here and giving her presentation on soil in the age of antibiotics. And I think that sounds like, Matt, that'd be something that you'd be interested in as well. So as soon as Matt comes back, we have a great deal of questions in the Q&A, and I think I can actually combine some of them into one question that was really drove in on the matter of the subject, and I think what people are interested in the Q&A. You ready, Matt?
Yeah, I just had to stretch.
Yeah, man. No worries, of course. Okay, so one person,
So like I said, an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. I know how to do this.
Nice. Well, yeah, we don't want to keep it too long for the Q&A, so we'll get to it, my friend. So yeah, so one person commented, great overview on the microbial action and impact of trace elements. Most attendees here are based in the Hudson Valley of New York State, which is where the Duchess Land Conservancy is based. A typical soil pH here would be around 5.6 with varied arable land and deciduous woodland. What advice and pointers would you give for this part of the Northeast?
So you're going to want to pay really close attention to your Goldilocks, redox pH kind of levels. And so if you go too acidic, you have aluminum, right? And because you have so much water flowing through and have had historically so much water flowing through, you're going to be leached of a lot of things, like nitrogen, for instance. So you're going to want to think holistically about what you're doing, maybe get a broad fork, maybe rip. And so that you get oxidation in there, you shift it, but you don't pulverize it. Because that's the thing is, it's like you want air. You got to aerate your soil when you're that reduced, and then you, I would focus on nitrogen fixers, but pairing it with things that are going to bring you up in pH. So those would be your non-mycorrhizals, actually, because they're antagonistic and they bring things up into the more oxidized range. So, for instance, when I talked earlier about the 5 cousins, you have buckwheat, you have amaranth, and then you do have cowpeas, but you also have daikon radish. So already we're more leaning towards alkaline, and we're more leaning towards more oxidized. And then you could also put in like sorghum in there, or something like really fast growing, that will just provide more organic matter. I think the other thing to think about is making sure that your soils are coherent. So figuring out what nutrients are in your water, what nutrients are in your soil, and then figuring out where those antagonisms are on the Mulder chart, and buffering, making sure they buffer out. And so one of the ways that people are figuring out that this is happening is they're doing the plant sap analysis. And I know it's expensive, but if you're a farmer and this is your bread and butter, you may invest in this, because the reality is you may have it in your soil, but it may not be being uptaken by the plant, or your soil tests don't even reveal it's in the soil. The plants are getting it. So this is one of those things where I would highly recommend going as deep as you can with your testing, to really understand your soil needs. Because the thing that I've learned most is that we haven't fully mapped the needs of each bioregion soils, because we haven't done enough testing. So I would say do mineral testing, do plant sap analysis testing or bionutrient meter testing. I would gently aerate, like ripping or with a broad fork. And then I would, I mean, for that bioregion, as long as you are keeping it from going too acidic, I would start doing fermentations of nitrogenous inputs, and so that they're already an amino acid, and adding those in when you're doing plantings, so that the plants, it doesn't matter that there's no nitrogen really there, and you give it to them in a biological form, and then you also inoculate them with nitrogen fixers like cerevisiae yeast. Cerevisiae yeast goes inside plants and fixes nitrogen. In fact, any microbe that goes inside a plant has to fix nitrogen to stay in the plant. It's how they pay their rent. So yeah, I would do all those different things. But I also would partner up with a bunch of people from your area. Maybe the Dutchess Land Conservancy can kind of like provide a place for this, but or facilitate this. But I would try to compare your test results to each other, and that's what the database that I'm creating is going to be for. But just start, because you're going to see things. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, you're deficient in that too. Okay, I think we're all deficient in zinc. Whoa. Okay, you know what I mean? And in a climate where you get as much water as you do, you're going to have certain things that are completely getting leached away. Remember the redox. You're in pH 5, right? So certain things are not even become available. Certain things actually have to be at pH 7 or higher to even be available. So yeah, I would check out my book, because the second you see my book, you'll start using it to interpret the data that you get from your tests. And that's one of the most powerful things that comes from making something that is a representation of nature rather than an interpretation of nature, because it keeps teaching you.
Yeah, that's good advice. And just to follow up on that, in terms of soil testing, anybody locally who wants to get their soil tested, you can go to our local branch of Cornell Cooperative Extension. Their office is just down the road from the Dutchess Land Conservancy office here in Millbrook, and they will tell you how to collect your sample, and it gets sent to the Cornell lab where they do all of the analyses that you're talking about.
And Cornell, I know that like it's popular nowadays to point out the failings of like universities and such. And but Cornell is one of those universities that does a really good job. And they basically like release manuals on how to do things. Like the shiitake manual they released is still the best manual. So anyway,
Yeah, they have a lot of great
Yeah.
resources. The College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, I think, it's a great website with a lot of good resources. So we have another question here from a local gardener who's wondering, do you recommend growing a cover crop in vegetable gardens? This is someone who adds leaf mulch and a layer of compost during the winter.
Yes. And I totally understand your climate. I grew up in Connecticut and Vermont and New Hampshire. So I understand that you're like, but when do we do it? Right? Because your seasons can be very short. The reality is there are specific heirlooms that are incredibly quick growing and hardy, and you can be growing them in early spring and then mulching them and tilling them in. You can also be companion planting. In all those photos, was companion planting the whole time. And so I always had legumes mixed in. And if you're like, Matt, legumes don't play nice for me, I'm like, well, get bush beans then. They go poof, they're not going to mess with you, and if you must, I give them trellis, give them something to climb. So I would say that. You can fit it in with those heirlooms. Baker Creek has good heirlooms, especially in the legume category. And Seed Savers Exchange, they're the best model for a seed company, I think. And they do have some that are really good too, but you kind of have to shop around to find what you need. There's probably some Canadian growers too that you would buy from if you can find, because the reality is if you buy from someone in a hardier climate that grows in colder conditions, then you can basically like cheat. And as soon as the crocuses are coming up, you can like dig outside and plant, and you know what I mean? And then as soon as it hits that point, they start coming up. So that's what I would say.
Great, thank you. Next question coming in is, and I hope I pronounced this correctly. What are some of the top molybdenum bearing minerals? Molybdenum.
Molybdenum.
There it is.
It's in all organic matter, but there's the thing is I list them at the bottom of that page. Let me grab the book.
There we go. sneak preview into the book, right?
I'm back. Don't worry.
No worries. And we'll send out an
So
email with
literally what I do is in the book, and this is why people refer to it, they go in the book and they're like, oh, we're in carbon, oxygen, and then you find your mineral. And there you are. The roles of it, the sources and forms, toxicity and deficiency, and then what to do. So beans, corn seed, brassica leaves, peppers, and nuts of all sorts are high in molybdenum. They can be used in compost and compost teas and fermented plant juices, like the Korean natural farming methods. And in fact, the Korean natural farming methods of FPJ, fermented plant juice, and FFJ, fermented fruit juice, they've actually figured out that using them, they can get the equivalent potency of all the synthetic fertilizers. So in other words, we are wrapping our fingers around like the solution to all fertilizers right now. It's a huge moment in time because in the Midwest, you can be having aquaculture sites that are like raising carp and tilapia, and then their water, their wastewater, it can go right in the irrigation. And then you could also be making fish emulsion for nitrogen and fermenting it. So the business model's in place and people are starting to experiment with it and show the test results and accumulate the test results for everything. So that's and like you just saw, even I have to refer to it because every single one has a collection of things, especially the more obscure ones like boron and nickel. Like, you know, like they've got, each thing has a specific, boron is like plums, actually, believe it or not, plums. And so you could be doing like, oh, I'm going to buy a bag of plums at the local farmer's market, and I'm going to do a fermented plant juice process, and then I'm going to use the foliar spray or a seed soak, and I'm going to fix that. So we really do have all the pieces. We really can fix everything when it comes to soil and our plants, because nature wants to do it. That's the like the miracle of it, is like it wants to operate. And so if we just start doing things, it takes off. And many of us have seen this. Many of us have experienced this. It's one of the most incredible feelings, actually, to like really feel your garden or your food forest or your orchard just thrive. And you're like, ooh, you like that, don't you? Oh, I'm going to give you more compost. I love you. And the tree's like, ah, and you're like, yes. So yeah, I'm all about it. I'm all in.
Now we have a lot of interest in the concept of biochar. So there's a couple of people asking, is it possible to add too much biochar? And kind of along those same lines, is there such a thing as too much organic matter? Is there a point where the percentage of organic matter is too high?
Well, it's actually, it goes down to that more complexity, right? And so let's talk about biochar first. Biochar should have bio with it. It shouldn't just be char. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, the moment you take the char and add it to the soil, it's now biochar. And it's like, you just robbed your soil of humic compounds. You just tore your soil apart by putting dry char in there. So that's not good. So I have people that are doing grows with 85% biochar, and it's growing kale just fine. And if you think about the way that things have worked before fungi, plants, only way that they like moved on was fire. So that's why like coal was created, because for a long time before white rot and brown rot evolved, you'd have these massive fires of this built up wood. And so it's could you repeat the question? I got them on tangents.
The questions are basically asking, is there such a thing as too much biochar to add to the soil?
Right.
And
Oh, that's what I
is
was
there a
trying to do.
percentage of organic matter that's too high?
They've evolved to grow after a lot of plants have been evolved to grow after huge fires and to grow in char rich soil. So I am of the opinion that we don't really know yet because of that 85% experiment that I saw that Pacific Biochar was doing. So that's what that connection was. So organic matter, let's say we take that fresh compost, the best delanium compost, we layer it on 5 feet thick, and then we water it and get it nice and wet. That's just going to be a big soggy thing. It's not going to breathe. There's no structure in hot compost. So you just made a big soggy mess. And then it turns anaerobic, and then it gases off all the nutrients. So we have to think about organic matter in terms of structure. Is it structured organic matter? And then also we can't actually outcompete the plants. You can add compost, but in terms of structure, incorporated carbon into the soil, that is done more efficiently by plants. So adding compost is incredibly important, incredibly good, but it still takes time for the microbes to incorporate and structure it, which makes sense. You can't immediately just be poof soil. And so the plants actually are doing the deposits at a microbial level, though. It's not like a fork of compost or an inch of compost. We're talking about like microscopic like releases of carbon. And so these things are being finely structured when the plant is doing it. And so it's much more lasting in the way that's being created and handled. So when I think about, is there such a thing as too much organic matter? I mean, the peat, peatlands, they grow very well and they're 100% organic matter. They're structured. So that's the real kicker here, is we need to make sure we have the biology there and the roots to provide the support to create the structured soil that we want. And then organic matter levels, we can only guess because people weren't testing for that in the past, and all the prehistoric archaeological stuff that we do is so tainted. And people speak with such adamancy, and it's just so wrong. Like archaeological science, every time they find something new, it just like rewrites everything. And it's like, then why were you talking with such like certainty and pizzazz over like, this is the way it is? It's like American prehistoric history. It's like, it's wild. It's like, yeah, anyway. So yeah, we don't have those properly mapped out yet. And that's part of the reason why the database is so important. So we can show the caveats, conditions, and ranges of things.
Cool. Thank you for that, Matt. This next question, I think, could be answered in a lot of different contexts, but I want you to kind of interpret the question a little bit. And I think we could take this from, again, maybe the upstate New York area where this question likely came in from. So what is the most important thing a home gardener can do? And I know that we kind of covered that a little bit, but like I guess the tip of the pyramid, what's the first thing or most important?
The most important thing is that you have the correct biology, because they have the most control over all the expressions in your soil, and they can retask pathogens to be beneficial inside plants. Even it's like fusarium gets retasked by beneficial like endophytes. It's unbelievable. So yeah, the right microbes.
Well, thank you.
And a similar question that kind of scales it up a little bit, asking, can your holistic methods be applied on an agribusiness level to transform our farmlands?
Yes. So regenerative soil goes up to the acreage and goes up to the tonnage. So you can do any of your tests, and then you can calculate the needs of it. You can do the actual scale for anything, because I've mapped it out for each of the natural solutions and what's actually in them and what they actually do. So it's really incredible. We really are at the beginning of a completely new era because of that. Regenerative ag um, never had any of those recipes, and so they had these like organic ag recipes, which were mixed with a lot of hope. And they didn't follow through testing, but out of that came living soils that we did have the ability to track and we were able to learn from. And that's the only reason we know what endophytes are, because it was the healthy organic farmers that found microbes inside their plants. And so, 20 years ago, Elaine Ingham would say, if there's microbes inside your plants or inside your roots, you have sick plants. I mean, it's published in her books, you know what I mean? And it's just because we had dead soils. Even in the soils she was working with compost, the soils hadn't gotten to the point where they were rich enough that the microbes were in the plants. So it's this process of change and growth that we're all part of. So I would get those microbes in there, and I would check out my book or check out my videos online, because I have a lot of this information shared in more depth on my YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's cool to understand that science kind of builds on itself, right? And we don't have the permanent answer, but we're working toward it, right?
Yeah.
I love that stuff. Okay, next question coming in. What ingredients would you recommend for creating your own EM fertilizer?
Oh, well, it's in the recipe for that is in the Permaculture Student 2, which is free on my website, thepermaculturestudent.com. And the audiobook for that entire book is also free on YouTube. So it's a 450-page peer-reviewed textbook. And it's really simple. Kombucha has the cerveza yeast that you need and has lactobacillus, so it has the lab that you need in it. You can use rice wash water as well. And you could be using water kefir as well to get lab. The water kefir is going to have a little bit more variety of lactic acid bacteria than the rice wash water KNF version of doing that. Purple non-sulfur bacteria will be in vermicompost and worm castings. I found it in all composts that are good composts. So you could be adding compost to your brew as well. So I mean, you're like, wait, this is partial compost tea? Yeah, it's partial compost tea, but it's a ferment. And the crazy thing is, you flip it, you're like, well, is EM natural? Is EM like everywhere? Yeah, EM is actually everywhere too. So EM is in all the good composts. So Elaine Ingham, was my mentor, and she told me EM's bad, it's dangerous, anaerobic, all this stuff. But the reality is, it's actually in all the composts I've ever tested by her top students. So it's really important to understand that these things aren't harmful. These things are very natural. These things are everywhere, and we're using them all the time. And EM is edible. So there is, it's not in this room, but EM Pro is for human consumption, and it's CCOF and organic USDA, and it's approved for human consumption. It's cerveza yeast. It's different kinds of lactic acid bacteria, lactobacillus casei, and it's purple non-sulfur bacteria. And it's specifically Rhodocytomonas palustris is the purple non-sulfur bacteria. I searched for years for that information, hard fought, hard won, but I'm sharing it with you. Literally, I spent, I would say, 7 years researching that purple non-sulfur bacteria to prove that it was Rhodocytomonas palustris. And so, yeah, it's totally possible. You also could buy, here's a huge reveal too. This took a few years to figure out. You can buy actual purified cultures of purple non-sulfur bacteria to add in. So this is Biosun. They're okay. The good one is Oh, it's in the other room. I think it's in the other room. Hold on. Let me do a scan. I'm surrounded by ingredients here.
We're all picturing your room right now, just like shelves of files and.
That's, you mean, yep.
Awesome.
So there's another company, I can't remember it, but they've got better. These ones they're so purple non-silver bacteria, Rhodosodomonas palustris. It's actually red. It looks like a poppy flower, and it's rhodo. It's red. You know what I mean? So it's not purple. Keep that in mind. But you can get a purified culture of that and add that as well. So you can all do this. The second most dominant microbe in all compost is Streptomyces. So the actinobacterial component already there. So you really have the ability to, everyone has the ability to create this. The recipe's in that book. It's free online. And a more sophisticated series of recipes is in Regenerative Soil. Because like, as you can tell, there's ways to iterate it. I use rock dust, water kefir grains, kelp, sometimes blue spirulina. I use a lot of different things in my fermentation, my bioferts. So
Wow, microbes, the little things that run the world.
they do.
Which I think is a phrase E.O. Wilson used to describe insects, but I think we can scale it down to microbes too. So we've got a couple of just clarification questions here. What is the 5 cousins, and what is that chop and drop method that you referenced?
Oh, okay. So it's sorghum, it's cowpeas, it's amaranth, it's buckwheat, and it's daikon radish. And they all perform different functions. I've got a whole video on this on my YouTube. But the daikon radish goes like 2 feet deep, making a hole in the compost in the ground. But it also is a nitrogen and phosphorus like sponge, just soaks it up. And then buckwheat actually steals nitrogen from the cowpeas, and the cowpeas end up working much harder. This is why I call them cousins. That's how they behave. And then you got like sorghum, which is a C4 grass, so it's bringing in tons of sugars and carbons. That's why you can make sorghum syrup. It's sugars. And then amaranth, because of the biomass and because it attracts little birds, not big birds. And the little birds are constantly releasing manure onto the soil. So those in combination are really, really powerful. And they also have different redox demands and needs, and so it creates a lot of differential. So that's what that is. And then what was the other question?
The other question is, what is chop and drop? It was a method that you described.
Chop and dropping is basically like poor man's like mulching, essentially. So you're chopping and dropping everything down, and because it's in a sheet, because things are mostly whole and not like minced, you tend to have these um fermentation events happen, and the soil freaks out and like almost heaves with biology. And so you can really transform a site very quickly, especially in your climate. The humid, cool, cold, temperate climate, because of your decomposition and because of the amount of fungal activity you have, you can change your soils very quickly. But it's usually like in those kinds of soils, it's like the things that leach that are the things that require alkaline conditions that are the most precious. But just remember that if you've got a well-developed soil, that as it reaches the surface, it becomes more oxidized and more alkaline. And as you go deeper, it becomes more reduced and more acidic. So you get all those expressions in there, and that's why you have roots near the top and the roots near the bottom of the 6 to 8 inch range, you know.
Cool, thank you. Kind of a bigger question coming in. How does the practice of no-till farming fit in with the regenerative soil approach? And the individual is also thanking you for a great session.
Oh, thank you for being here. So The thing with tillage is we have to recognize that, again, we need to bring complexity and sophistication to the conversation. We can't have a one size fits all, because if we stop tilling altogether, no annuals would grow. You need disturbance for annuals to grow. So in that singing frog farm example, they're bringing in compost, disturbing the soil and planting that transplant with new compost. And so they're still disturbing the soil. They're still creating some, it's not tillage, but it's disturbance. And so you need disturbance for annuals to grow. They've proven that you can interplant and intercrop with valuable grasses and perennials in wild grasslands in Australia. So they've proven like we can do a lot of really cool things. But we do need to till and break things up if they're toxic, if they've got hard pan. We do need to break things, mix things in if we've got severe deficiencies or toxicities, especially because you want your medicine to reach all the parts. And usually we're talking organic matter and microbes are the medicines. And so no-till has to have a thinking cap on when we use it. Because in Iowa, no-till is not regenerative. They go out there and after the season's over, they spray it down with glyphosate to the tune of like desiccation, and they destroy their field. And that's them being no-till. So it's really important that we like bring all that out to the surface. And you probably weren't asking for all that. Forgive me for going so far into it, but we need to have low till and no till be acceptable. We need to be able to go to that 1.5 inches. And we also need to be able to like focus on like the center of the row rather than like the whole row. We need to develop methods that are more sophisticated. We need to work with perennial cover crops on the edges of a lot of these rows, so that we're talking about like dichondra, we're talking about purslane, maybe even on the edges of these fields, strawberry spinach, because they create that stability in the system that's needed. And what do I mean by that? When the annuals are done and they've got that bare field, everything dies. The microbes need consistent additions of sugar from, and it's not just sugar, it's not just cakes and cookies that they're putting out, the plants, the roots, but they need photosynthesis to continue. So unless you have a perennial hedgerow or perennial cover crop, or your pathways are grass or something, the microbes have nowhere to go. So fundamentally, we really have to like think systemically and think about the way things work cyclically and behave, because we've thought about things from like this chemistry, mathematical, machinist kind of way of thinking, and it's destroyed the world. It's desertified the world. It's poisoned the world. And it's destroyed the natural ecosystemic engines that produce all the natural capital that we rely upon, the clean water, the clean air. And we need to bring those back. And when we do, man, it's just going to be such an incredible thing. And I really think we need to involve the next generation so they can own that, so they can be like, we repaired the world. And then they teach their kids that ethic. That's what gets me excited.
And that's a good segue into our last question, which is another really big one about climate change. Do you think that climate change will play a role in the future of regenerative farming?
Yeah. So as you probably could have guessed, I have a more complicated opinion upon all those narratives out there, right? And the reality is desertification is the original unsexy climate change. And it's the one they abandoned and won't look at. They're like, oh, I don't see it. Nope. We don't see the desertification. And meanwhile, it's because that has the easiest solution. And try not to get upset. I am so mad at these people because they're playing games. The UN recently, they're like, top UN scientists releases that organic matter is carbon. It's like, people aren't dumb, dude. People aren't dumb. You're acting like people are dumb. You're treating people like they're dumb. And so there's this carbon economy scheme is a scheme, and we know it because my friend Neil Speckman, who greened the desert in Saudi Arabia with just rainwater, is trying to work with indigenous peoples all over the world, and they're already cheated out of their carbon credits. And through that, they lost control of their land. So he's dealing with tribes of people that literally lost their property rights already. And it didn't happen through the minerals. It didn't happen through the oil. They fought them off all through that time period. But it was the carbon people. The people were like, oh, we're going to save you. Oh, sign. And they took that. So I get really upset because they're taking the good nature and they're taking the good nature of those people and abusing it. And that to me is a crime, a deep, deep crime. So I get really like a little bit worked up about this. The reality is that climate change is real. Climate change has been happening. And if we think about it, there's layers to this. There's your bioregional, there's the global, and then there's the cyclical that is, and then there's like the sun level too. And like if a meteor hits us, if a meteor that or a comet or something hit like Antarctica, like a nuclear explosion and immediately melted all that, the whole world would change. So it's like we have to recognize that there's all these different things that historically have gone into creating our climate and the dynamics of our climate. And so the reality is the Fertile Crescent was once fertile. It was desertified by humans. The Loess Plateau was where ag began in China. They desertified it as well, but they reversed that in 9 years. China, the US, and the World Bank. They reversed all the desertification in the Loess Plateau in only 9 years. And it cost $14 per hectare to do per year. They know how to repair the landscapes, and they've done it in Vietnam because, and I know the person who repaired all the watersheds because they had been all bombed out. They repaired the watersheds so that it could be a productive country. World Bank did this. They all know how to repair the watersheds, and you repair the watersheds, you restore the grasslands, you restore the forests, you bring in perennial agriculture, you bring in permaculture, and suddenly you have nature just rebound. And what does that look like? Well, in the desert, in Saudi Arabia, in these places that like certain religions, scriptures are based around milk and honey, these places that were unbelievable, Cedars of Lebanon, these incredible spaces, they're all deserts now, but they are being turned back into unbelievably gorgeous and stirring landscapes of beauty. That's what Neil Speckman proved that can be done with trees, earthworks, and rainwater. And what does that do to the climate? Well, the climate suddenly on the ground, you have the water cycle begin to slow down. Instead of it being once every year or once every 3 years that it comes raining, and it rains in a violent flooding event where all the rain comes all at once. And this is what happens in the deserts. And this is what we're seeing more and more all over the earth. We're seeing more and more violent weather, and it's desertification weather. We're desertifying. And so the trees aren't there. Trees actually create rain. Trees are the thing that moderates the climate around you. That's why you go under the tree in the heat. It's like, oh, it's so much cooler here under the tree. And then if you're in winter and you're really cold, you know that you go into the trees and it's warmer. I mean, yeah, if it's sunny, but you guys, I'm from where you guys are from. I was a Killington Mountain School student. I was a ski racer. You go into the trees and you warm up. And so recognizing all these patterns is so critically important. I started getting into permaculture. I started studying all this. I started studying the carbon, and I realized that we fundamentally didn't understand the carbon cycle. We needed more carbon. And that sounds crazy until you talk to farmers in Iowa who are surrounded by corn, and they're going, man, the CO2 levels are so low. We're thinking about, bringing greenhouses and pumping CO2 into it. And you're like, wait, what? Oh, yeah, because they're surrounded by just plants, no compost, and hardly any engines because they hop on their thing and do their thing once a year. You know what I mean? So you go to the middle of the city and they have no photosynthesis and no plants. And so it's all stagnant CO2. And so there's no balance with any of our systems. And they're all creating this extremification and the balanced, more complex series of perspectives is what I always try to work within, because that's where truth is. And it's always in the series of perspectives, always looking at all of it, even the stuff that doesn't fit perfectly into like what we would like it to be, because that's where truth lies. It's there, not in my opinion, not in anyone's opinion. It's in the all the different perspectives, all the information, and looking at it with an open mind. And what I've seen during that process is that we're missing most of the photosynthetic capacity of the earth. So all the carbon that's bottlenecking in the sky isn't being sucked up by the plants. And we could fix this. And they're like, oh, well, we planted more forests. It's greener than. There's a big difference between a 200, 300 foot tall canopy that's been there for hundreds of years and a sprout. And in fact, it takes 20 to 25 years for a forest to switch from being a taker to a giver. So the young forests all over the world that we just all replanted in the past 30, 40 years, for the most part, are all taking still because they're in their nursery time period where they're growing up. And that's okay. Let's not be angry at those poor forests. They will help us. But we also need to get regenerative ag doing this now, because the amount of carbon sequestered is actually staggering. And yes, the fungi does release carbon, but oh my word. One of the studies, I mean, it's 400 times the carbon that's released per year is taken up by corn per acre of corn. And it's because at the end of the year, they spray it with glyphosate or till it, and then release all that carbon from the soil that it was putting into the soil. We have all the pieces in front of us. And we need to increase the amount of photosynthetic capacity so that when we bring back the soils and they start releasing more carbon, it's handled in situ. And it's not actually circulating. So we're flexing through way more carbon. And the plants are healthier, the microbes are healthier, because the engine, which is carbon, the actual currency, which is carbon, is increasing the flow. But when you test for it, it's less because it's so efficient. And that was our past. We lived on a very efficient world. And because of the breakdown of the systems in our world, we have these weird bottlenecks and deficiencies and toxicities and aberrations that are confusing. People are looking at the world around them as if this is natural. The father of all the conservation movements in America was Aldo Leopold. He wrote the San Colony Almanac as a collection of essays, and it was released late in his life in the 40s. And he lamented the loss of all wild places in America.
That's one of my favorite books.
They cut down the forests and replanted them with the things they wanted. The undesirable plants didn't make it. The animals that relied upon those plants, they're gone. The microbes, gone. It's a very humbling situation to be in. But we need to approach it from that space to actually allow for learning to happen, because we need to let things go wild a little bit. We need to create situations where we let animals and predators return, just like that Yellowstone experiment. How much information did we gain from bringing back the wolves? Holy cow. And there's a lot of lessons bundled into there, you know, and people have a lot of different opinions about that. But the amount of information that we learned is incalculable.
Yeah,
And
it's
so we
so
need to do,
true. Yeah,
so we
and
need, keep going.
I don't want to cut you off. I just want to be respectful of people's time. We've run over by quite a lot.
That's me.
But we've covered an awful lot of ground and you've given us a lot to think about. So thank you very much. There were a lot of great questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours, but we did cover an awful lot of ground here tonight. And I think we're all going to have a lot to think about moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so
Thanks so
glad to
much for
be
your
here.
time,
Thank
Matt.
you. Oh, thank you. I had so much fun. As you can tell, I can go on forever. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, keep growing.
You bet.
Yeah.
You too.
All right.
Thank you very much. Good night, Matt.
Thanks. Good
All
night,
right, good
Matt.
night,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.